I'm done with this. But finding yourself going back to that tainted well every so often and not really knowing what true freedom is and not going back to that well ever took much longer.
Yeah, and also recognizing what are the triggers, what's going on, what's the helplessness or the insecurities or whatever that's feeding it, because pornography is not the root problem.
Pornography is just a symptom.
It's just a symptom.
Yep.
So finding out what that is, and then also being able to go.
Hello, and welcome to another amazing episode of TMC, where we are here to help you take your relationship
from surviving to thriving. If this is your first time joining us, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell so you won't miss any of these amazing episodes.
Today on TMC, we have Rich and DeAnna Millentree with Marriage and Pornography.
Been married for 26 years and
Awesome.
And we have two children. We have a 23-year-old and an 18-year-old, and we are currently empty nesters and loving it.
Empty nesters. So what is that like?
It's like when you were first dating as kids. So when we first met each other, we met the first day of our sophomore year in high school. So I was 14 years old, DeAnna was 15.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that dating process, and then we were married and we waited 3.5 years before we had our first child.
Yes.
So empty nesting is exactly like that 3.5 years before the first baby came along.
But even better because we're more mature.
Absolutely, yes. Way better.
Guys said you've been married for 26 years. What is the one thing you wish you knew before getting married?
Well, for me, there's many things, but I'll just put this. Going into marriage, a lot of us have the mindset that, I came from the Taylor background. He came from the Millentree, and my way was right. But to him, his way was right. So we fought a lot about, having those differing viewpoints and stuff. And I wish that I would have known and been okay that he has his way of doing things. I have my way of doing things. Neither is right or wrong. They're just different. And we're able to celebrate those differences and give room for each other. So that's what I really wish that I think that would have helped me out in the early years.
Yeah. And I think the thing that would have helped me is if someone had shared with me, your marriage is going to be one of God's most frequent and key instruments in growing you up and maturing you as an individual. I had the concept of that marriage was just, this is going to be fun. This is just what you do when you become an adult. It's the next evolution of life. And this is what happens. Right. And that everything revolves around me. Like, let's go do the things that I want to do. Learn very quickly, actually very slowly. I shouldn't say quickly.
Right.
It was in my face pretty quickly, but I was a super slow learner in this process, in this maturation process. But I wish someone had shared that with me and let me know also how to put legs to that, what it actually means for that to be worked out in my life and what that's going to look like maybe year 1, 2, and 3 versus year 7, 8, 9 versus year 15, 16, 17, etc.
So over the 26 years, and Rich, like you talked about during your maturation process and growing up and continuing to learn the thing that you did not know before you were married, or the thing that you didn't fully have an understanding of before you were married, what are some possible challenges that were presented as you all were year 5, year 10 that were presented, and how did you navigate through those challenges?
Wow. We had a lot, actually. I would say one of the big challenges for us came in, I'm going to say year 2. I remember the day. I remember some of the details, but there are some details that I will never, ever forget. But one of the things that I remember so clearly is I came to the end of myself and I said, I do not want to be this way anymore. I don't want to be a slave to pornography. I don't want this to continue to wreck my life and to wreck my own marriage. So that evening, I came and told DeAnna, I was like, hey, I need to talk with you about something. And she had no clue. It wasn't like she caught me. She didn't have any suspicion. She didn't have, it was none of those things. It was, I truly wanted to be different. And God was doing something deep in my heart that he wanted to address. And so I told her, I said, babe, I've got an issue and I've got a problem, a big problem with pornography. And these are all the things. And I'll never forget, we sat in bed, and then we went to bed that evening, and we snuggled and we cuddled each other, and we cried some more, and we talked some more, and we were angry. DeAnna was angry, and I was ashamed, and I wanted to run away. But I could also feel from my wife as well that she didn't throw me away. Like I wasn't a piece of garbage to her. She said, okay, get out of here. This is over. I don't want you anymore. I don't want this marriage, etc. She loved me through it, truly. And I wish we had more time to talk about that, and maybe sometime we will, but that in and of itself is a highlight of our marriage, and truly a testament to God's grace and his glory in our lives as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to ask you, there's a lot of relationships right now that don't feel like pornography. You know, they heard you just say that and they thinking like, okay, what's the deal with pornography? How is that hurting our marriage? I think this is really be helpful because you have relationships, you have men and women that are unsatisfied in the relationship and they not understanding why. I want both of you to really share with the TMC community and let us know why you feel it's not a good idea for a marriage.
Yeah,
Right.
Really, really great question.
Pornography is not just a male issue, husband or wife, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Either one. It's whenever you're taking the affection that you should be reserved only for your spouse and you're putting it somewhere else. And one of the devastating effects of it, one of the many devastating effects of pornography is that it really desensitizes you. So you are not, the affection that you're getting, you may not be able to perform as well. And, you know, as if you were just having your affections towards your wife, it's a corrupt avenue to go down.
Yeah, can I interrupt you really quick? Okay, so the one thing that DeAnna just said there was it desensitizes you, and we can gloss over that really quickly. But I want to share a little bit about how that desensitization happened in my life. And I am very much so, and always have been. I emote. I am a feeler. You know, if there's a Hallmark commercial on, it's not her that's crying, it's me that's crying.
If there's a dog or a cat crying,
Right.
people know.
Yes. So me being so steeped in pornography in those early years of our marriage, there was one particular area, there were many, but this one will always have a special place in my heart because, again, it's God's grace to me. Yeah. When DeAnna went into labor with our oldest son, who's now 23 years old, and during the delivery, like, of course, this is our first baby. We were both extremely happy. It was a wonderful experience, but there was something in my heart that I could not shake. And the question that I was asking myself is, why don't I feel anything? I didn't feel overjoyed, and I knew that I should have been overjoyed. If anyone was going to be overjoyed, it was going to be me. Right. Why did I not experience and have those tears of happiness that were flowing? Because that should have been me. And looking back over that and really coming out of that time, I knew it was the pornography. It had desensitized me so much that I was out of touch with the things I should have been in touch with.
Most people would think, oh, it's just sexually oriented. You know,
Right.
it's just that avenue, but it goes.
It affects
every aspect of your life.
It will touch every aspect. So fast forward 5 years later, when we had our daughter, who is she is, look, from the get out of the womb, she knows no stranger. This girl, we love her to death. And when she was born 5 years later, there was an overjoy and an outward flow of emotion and all of those things. And I'll tell you, that work of working through that pornography in my life, I say those first 5 years were some of the hardest in my life and in our marriage that we had to tackle.
Yeah.
And not only did it take us going to counselors, me being accountable to, I had a great dad who helped me along with this. I had great friends and friends who now I call brothers during that particular time that helped me and walked me through this. Had it not been for those men, I don't know where I would be right now.
Right.
The one thing that I would say here, because I know a lot of men will pick up on this and they'll say, oh yeah, well, I'll just have my wife hold me accountable.
No.
Your wife cannot be your accountability partner in this particular journey, man. You need a man, someone who is going to love you, that you can show your real self to. And my dad was an absolute master at this, where I would say I am worthless. I don't have value. You might as well throw me away because I just can't seem to get my act together and all the things. And my dad was masterful, and he'd say, you come close, son. And he'd reach down into your heart and he'd pull out this gold brick that just shined and said, you are not those things. This is who you are. You are X, Y, and Z, and you are A, B, and C, and you are this, and you are that, and you are, and then it's like the fog lifted, and you can see like, yeah, I am those things, but I don't know how to get there. I don't know how to be those things. Help me to get there, Dad, and to do those things. And of course, he was along for the journey, but that's a part of the journey that he can't do for you. And so he'd hold it out and he'd say, son, this is you. Look at it. Look at it. And then he'd put it right back down inside of you. And then he'd say, now go get it. And I tell you what, if it had not been for him, my brother, my counselor, my wife, we would not be here today. It would be a different situation. As much as there was a place in my heart where I really, truly loved those things, there was also a place in my heart where I couldn't stand myself or those things.
Yeah.
I was disgusted with myself. And it was that place of, how do I allow the truth of God's word to swallow up the lie of the enemy and what pornography is doing in my life? It's offering me a false intimacy. It's telling me that I'm going to give you and meet all of the things of your life that you really want. I'm going to give you that place of safety, that place of security, that place of being welcome, that place of everything is going to be okay. Anything in life that's worth anything is difficult and hard. Just look at your marriage. Your marriage is difficult and hard. But it brings back the pleasure and the rewards that you reap from it are exponential. You can't, there's nothing that compares to it.
Yeah. You're talking about 23 years ago, if I'm correct, right? 23?
Correct. But let's talk about that, because it's not just I've got an issue. I prayed about it and things are all better.
And God delivered me.
And
he does do that, but
absolutely
not all the time.
does. Yes. But that's not the majority of time. That's not normal. That's not normative. So my journey was, the struggle was those first 5 years were really hard and really tough.
And that was early on.
Oh,
he
absolutely.
Was in his teen years, so it wasn't just, it was a long time.
100%. And then you get to a place of, I feel good. I feel like I have this under control. And then you realize, no, that hook is still in there. And it may not be as much as it was 5 years ago or 3 years ago, but there is still a rhythm and a pattern and a giving yourself over to this sin, and you are still very much a slave to this, if we're going to use kingdom language by biblical language.
Yes.
That you are still a slave to it. So coming out of that and learning how to walk in freedom was not a one and done, and it was not just a 5-year process. I would probably say that it was probably a 7 to 12, 13-year process. And when I say 7, I mean 7 was like, I really feel good. I'm done with this. But finding yourself going back to that that tainted well every so often,
Right.
and not really knowing what true freedom is and not going back to that well ever took much longer.
Yeah, and also recognizing what are the triggers, what's going on, what's the helplessness or the insecurities or whatever that's feeding it, because pornography is not the root problem.
Pornography is just a
it's
symptom.
just a symptom.
Yeah.
Yep.
So finding out what that is, and then also being able to go to those accountability partners, and then also for me to be able, how was I going to handle myself? Because a lot of women are like, no, that's your issue. Well, it is his issue, but I'm along for the ride. I'm along to journey with him. So how am I going to handle myself whenever he's coming to me? Because I want him to come to me and let me know, hey, today's been a rough day.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how can I support you? How can I pray for you? And just being able to have him so that he doesn't feel that I'm not a safe place for him, because I do need to be a safe place whenever he's coming to me.
Yeah. So DeAnna, you just talked about something. I know Cedric have a question. I'm sorry.
Go for it.
You talked about being a safe place for him during this process. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I'm thinking about the wife or the husband that is out there and they're now dealing with that with their spouse, and they're working through the process, and they may not fully understand, or they want to try to be a safe place. And I want to talk a little bit about what that looked like for you and how were you able to do that?
Exactly what she's saying. But I know a lot of times the woman can feel some type of way. She can take it personal, and it can cause that issue. So kind of dealing with both of those together would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the beginning, I was not a safe place. So, I mean, I felt all the feels. I was hurt. I was devastated. I was angry. I felt insecure. I felt less than, all of that. And so for me to also be able to go to somebody, a trusted girlfriend that loved me as much as she loves my husband. So it couldn't have been, I couldn't go to somebody that did not like him, because all I would hear was, oh, he's no good. You got to leave him, all that. I did not want that. So I had to go to somebody that loved both of us the same. And they were on the side of our marriage, not on the side of DeAnna or on the side of Rich. Once I was able to establish that and to be able to have somebody as a sounding board and say, this is a rough time, and that he felt safe as well, because I didn't want to be blabbing our dirty laundry to everybody and then someone going and telling the whole world about it.
Right,
that's not good.
Yeah.
So you have to be very wise in that. And so the safe place is where I'm not going to beat him up. I recognize that I sin and I fall short as well. And I need forgiveness as much as I need to forgive him. Yeah. And to be able to take it to the Lord, and to be able to be not condescending, not judgmental or anything like that. So and to be able to handle it, because there were some times where I'm like, today's not a good day for me to hear this. I can't handle it. You have to go talk to one of your buddies, because I can't hear it right now. So just being able to recognize that, and that took time. That took the maturation process for me as well.
Yeah.
So
when I really got down to the root of, so this is why I spin out, so to speak, and I run to pornography, is when I understood what was going on inside of me that made me run there, because that made me feel a certain way. And that underlying thing was control. For me, it was control. So I grew up in a home where my mom and my dad, and when I was talking earlier about my dad, I was referring to my spiritual father, not my biological father. But my mom and my dad, my biological father and mom, our home was filled with chaos. Now, was it a loving home? Oh, absolutely. They loved us kids to death, to the moon and back. But it was filled with chaos. And my mom was a yeller, and she was not interested in hearing anyone else's opinion except for her own. And even my father's, is like, he didn't have a voice. It was like she had this wonderful gift to be able to grind a person down to nothing at all, and then blow the dust away. And we all knew that, this is just who she is and who she was. And we all have things in our lives. It's like she's working on those things as well. So I'm not going to throw a stone at her because she's growing in grace as well. The thing I carried with me, though, is I never had a voice. I didn't get a chance to put my 2 cents in. I didn't get a chance to say, well, I don't agree with that, or I don't like that, or why can't I have hot lunch at school and nobody else, and et cetera, et cetera. So for me, it was very much a place of When I felt beat down and out of control, I ran to pornography because it was a place for me to get control back. I was in control and I was being tended to in a way that made me feel good as well. So whenever DeAnna and I had a fight,
and I was a yeller.
DeAnna was a yeller too.
I am a yeller. I'm not gonna say I was.
Yeah. So that was a huge trigger for me. That was a huge, huge trigger for me. And when I would feel that trigger, the first place I'm going is to my buddy pornography, because pornography makes me feel great. So just thinking from the perspective of, oh, your wife and you have a fight, or your husband, you have a fight, and you are looking at it from a standpoint of win or lose, you're already in the wrong frame of mind. There is no win or lose. We win together, we lose together. That's it.
Amen.
So when I thought, oh, well, I lost this fight, guess where I'm going? I'm going to get my power back, and I'm going to pornography to make that happen. So for me, you taking my pornography away was also you taking my control away. And you're wanting me to be in a marriage where I don't have any control over my life and what happens and everything. That's not going to happen.
I want to go, because here it is, like, for example, that was 23 years ago. And now 23 years later, pornography is not in a magazine or you have to go and buy tapes. I mean, we have the internet, and pornography is everywhere. What would you say to an individual? Because pornography is on Facebook. I mean, even including myself. Sometimes I get on Facebook and I have a friend request, and it's some woman with her backside hanging out. And it's like, it's like these things just come, even if you don't go looking for it, it just comes. What would you say to that man or woman that is struggling with it today from their cell phones?
Oh man. So first I would say this. I couldn't agree with you more, Cedric. Like, when I was wrestling with pornography, it was, especially when I was a young kid. So my first exposure to a pornographic image was when I was 9 years old. So it was, you had to go into a liquor store and get a magazine. And of course, at my age, you couldn't get one. So you had to go back to the dumpster and dumpster dive for people to throw them away or whatever. It was a different world. Now, literally on our phones, especially our children, like, we could pop into Russia, then to China, then to Bangladesh, and then to India, and then to Canada, all before we get out of bed in the morning. Like, we have these cell phones in our pocket, which are literally, they're like porn portals for, especially for children. The one thing that I would share there is find someone that you can expose this to and bring it into the light. Doing that one thing, just that one thing, is a weight off of your shoulders. Like, you would not believe how big of a weight that is off of your shoulder. Now, please hear me. I am not saying go share this with your spouse right now so you can get that weight off of your shoulder. That is not fair to your spouse to dump that on them so you can be free or feel that weight lift off of you. What I'm saying is find that trusted individual, that trusted person that you can go and talk to openly and honestly. That person that's going to look you back and say, I love you, and I'm going to tell you the truth, and we're going to pray about this, and I am going to always lead you back to Christ Jesus for this issue. That's the person that you want to bring this to the light with, because you got to find the right person that you can share this with, because you sharing this with someone who you think may not have an issue, because we are masters of cloaking ourselves and saying, oh, I'm good, is like a grenade thrown in, and it blows up, and now they have had a relapse, and they go back to looking at porn themselves. So it's difficult, Cedric. It's a great question. It's really, really difficult. And what I would probably say outside of that one thing is find a coach or a counselor, because those people, they vetted their life, so to speak. Like, hey, I've been through this. I've done it. I know what's going on. I know I can look at you and tell no, you're not telling me the truth.
Mhm.
Right. And so you told me that you looked at porn, 3 or 4 times this week, but I know the real answer is you've probably spent 12 to 24, 26 hours in porn this week. It's not just been 3 or 4 times. It's been the majority of the week. You want someone who is going to be able to speak to the deep and secret places of the heart, that is also being led by the Spirit of God, who knows no secrets, who has no shifting shadow. And by the way, is not there to judge you.
Right.
He is there to pull you up.
And I want to say too, so, I think the first reaction for people is like, well, I'm just going to delete it from my phone. I'm going to, only allow myself to be on Facebook or whatever, a couple of hours a day or a couple hours a week. Well, that's not the way to do it. What he's saying is because when we feel out of control, insecure, whatever, we're going to be running towards it. And another thing I want to add too is for women, romance books that are X-rated, R-rated, that's pornography, sweetheart. So make sure that because that's a mind shift too. It's like, oh, well, we're just reading something. Well, no, that's women's porn right there.
Yeah. 50 Shades of Grey is one of the big ones from about 10 years ago. Let's
Before we go, well, you had another question?
No, I was I want to talk about growing in marriage.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You go ahead.
Okay, so before we go, let's talk about growing in marriage. How did it come to be, and what does it do for others in helping to sustain, repair marriages, helping other couples? What does growing in marriage do, and how did it come to be?
Great question.
Yeah. So growing in marriage, he was a marriage pastor at our former church, and we decided, okay, well, we're going to do this 1 question, 2 answers. So 1 question, and he answers it at a male's point of view, and me as female, obviously. So we did
Can I clarify?
Sure.
So we were doing home groups, life groups, and we wanted something to augment and enrich couples' lives. So instead of just getting a Sunday sermon and then a life group during the week, we felt like, man, our couples need more. We want to keep them plugged in so they stay in that rich soil of God's word. So we decided to start a podcast.
Yeah, and really to generate questions and dialogue amongst the spouses.
It was for our church only.
Yes. Yeah. And so we had it on our church app, and then all of a sudden we started getting people that were coming from the area just to meet us. And we're like, this is weird. Yeah. And so then we decided, okay, well, we're going to open it up to the public. And so that's whenever growing in marriage was birthed, basically. Yeah. So in a very small nutshell.
In a very a very quick nutshell. And so out of that, so growing in marriage then became we have a weekly podcast. We are pretty active on social media, particularly on Instagram. We do marriage conferences and retreats across the country. We have our own annual marriage retreat that we do. And then we also have couples counseling and couples coaching, biblical counseling and coaching that we provide for couples as well. So in a nutshell, that's growing in marriage, and that's what we do. And of course, you can find out a whole lot more about us on our website at growinginmarriage.com. We wrote a couple books. Well, you know what? We would love to send you guys a couple so you guys can give them out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Awesome. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. You definitely have some wisdom, some knowledge, and some fortitude that you can share with the TMC listeners, just like you did on tonight. Know that there's some great information. We're looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Go to our website or go to Instagram is another, because it's social. Everyone lives on social. Right. But yeah, growinginmarriage.com would be the best place to start to engage with us. I think the second best place, the place where we get a lot of feedback from couples and say, oh, I just stumbled across you guys, is our podcast. So I would also say start there. Just look up Growing in Marriage on whatever podcast service you use, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, whatever, and we'll come up and you guys can start to engage with us that way as well.
On behalf of the TMC community, we want to thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Shante, Cedric, this is our joy.
Yes,
thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much for for doing what you guys do, because there are not enough ambassadors out there for marriage, especially godly marriages.
Right.
That's the qualifier right there. That's where we experience real life.
Yes.
So thank you guys.
Yes.
The house.
Thank you for having us on.
We hope that you found this information helpful in this video. And if you did, go ahead and subscribe. Click the like button and turn on your notifications so you'll be notified each time we upload a video. And if you're listening on iTunes, rate the podcast and leave a review. That helps us get the word out. And we want to invite you to head on over to our leadership podcast, Lead to Greatness, where my husband is interviewing entrepreneurs and great leaders from all around the world every week.
So we want to thank you for joining us today on TMC. Looking forward to hanging out with you again on next week as we continue to help you take your relationship from surviving to thriving. Bye. See you next week.